Hello all, this is Raymond for Stream Gamers. Um, I'm going to do a video with a 172. I'm going to be taking off from Grace Lake, that's Charlie Juliet Romeo 3, and I'll be landing at the PA Airport, which is Charlie Yankee Quebec Delta. Uh, the two airports aren't that terribly important. What this is for is to explain and show how I take off with a Cessna 172 and how I land with it. By no means am I suggesting I'm an expert pilot, because I'm not. I'm a novice. I'm a simmer. I enjoy flying. I hope this is going to help people, uh, newcomers, to understand some of the things about flying, and some of the things that I've learned about flying, not maybe necessarily the correct way, but it more often than not seems to work for me. So one of the things that um, a newcomer might want to suggest or think about doing is not worrying about hand flying as much, but using autopilot and that kind of stuff. And I realize that simmers are going to say, well, no, you don't have to autopilot a 172. It is there just for newcomers to be able to. There's a lot going on, and it's there for newcomers to be able to get a better handle on what's going on with the aircraft and how to use the aircraft, and they're not finding themselves struggling because things are happening so fast. Speaking of fast, this is the reason why we use a 172, because if you use larger aircraft going faster, you have less time to process and remember all the things that are necessary. So I'm going to set up a little flight plan. I'm going to use an approach into Charlie Yankee Quebec Delta. That way it will give us an alignment, and those that are using this instructional video can do that same thing. Get their alignment to the runway. They don't have to worry about finding the runway, getting lined up to the runway, and making their approach. The takeoff will be all manual flight, of course, and I'll show you how that works as well. So first and foremost, let's get the flight plan put in. So we do a direct to, or we can do a file of flight plan. So there's that. So I'm going to do the direct to, and we scroll the outer wheel, taking ourselves to Charlie Yankee. Whoops. Let's get that right. Now I've gone, there we go. Charlie Yankee, whoops, Yankee, Quebec. Let's go this way. And Delta. So there's the PA Airport. We then want to hit enter to that, and we can activate that. So now we're going to go to an approach, and we'll use the approach, and we'll hit enter to the approach. Now, you can't see it, but I'm using Plan G to determine the actual runway. I'll be coming in 1-3. So we're going to hit enter. Huh. There is no, why is there no approach? That's interesting. Well, let's do an arrival. I don't think the arrival does it. All right, we won't be doing that. Good enough. I will add the points in myself manually. That's what I'll do. So I'll go to the flight plan. There it is. I'll click on this. That snaps it over. I want a flight plan that is before. I should zoom in on that a bit. I want a flight plan that's before here. So it will be, then I scroll here. It'll be TU GOG. enter. So you can see there it is, and I want to do another one, which will be after the, or before the arrival. Let me get to it. I'm just going to get the waypoint that I'm going to use. So I'm going to use, whoops, I'm going to use Victor. India. X-ray. India. And Romeo. So that's an enter. So we can see we're going to leave where we are. We're going to go to this waypoint, turn to this waypoint, go to the airport. And what that's going to look like is, I'll show you on Plan G what that looks like. Again, Plan G is something I use quite a bit. It's a very useful program. So before that, and then before that, let me, oops, there we go. So just push that in here so you can see what I'm looking at on Plan G briefly. Oh, it's going a little crazy. Right. So let me just move that into the screen. So we can see there we're taking off here. We'll take off this way. It'll come around. It'll go to this magenta, pull this magenta, fly here, turn here, through this waypoint, and there's the approaching runway that we're going to be approaching on. Right. So now we've got that set. I'll get rid of that little window. Now we're going to look at a pushback and get the engine started. So let us do the pushback. I use this application here. Break off. Tug. Sometimes the simulator, it seems to take a long time to get the tug in an alignment. I'm not sure what that's all about, but, and for those that are using pushback, you understand rights and lefts by looking at the aircraft in this view. So if I wanted it to turn this way, then I want to turn the aircraft right. And then if I want the aircraft to go this way, then obviously left. So I've got the aircraft hooked up to the tug, and I'm going to push it back to the right. So I go reverse, right, and of course you want to not have your engine running while this is happening because it's right there in the front. Pushback and that kind of stuff with an aircraft with engines like jets and that kind of stuff, you can usually begin the starting procedure on the start of pushback, or you know, props that are further back. You could start the procedure on pushback, but be careful not to start them up and have them both running. Jets would make it difficult for the tug to push you back. So that's the end of that. Our pushback guy is getting out of the way. Now we're going to starting the 172 is a very simple process. You got your battery on, your avionics on in order to set the flight plan. Talk to ATC if you want to. We're going to get rid of the yoke. We're going to make sure we got throttle, and we are going to fuel pump on and start. And there she goes. Put the alternator on. Should have had strobe on to let everybody know that's what we're doing. Should have had the brakes on. So we got The engine started. Now we're going to taxi out to the runway and get ourselves prepared for takeoff. Now, my intentions are to probably climb to probably 2,000 feet thereabouts. And then the arrival airport, this is stuff that you have to be paying attention to. So the arrival airport is 875 feet above sea level. I want to be, for myself personally, I want to be 3 miles out, and I want to be 1,500 feet above the airport. So 1,500 plus, say 900 gets us 2,400 feet. So 3 miles out, I want to be 2,400 feet. That's the ideal thing, or 1,500 feet above the runway. So let's get the brake off, and let's taxi out. Brake off. Let's make sure we're all set. Taxi light is on, nav, beacon, panel is on, and we don't have any icing, but we'll put pitot tube and that on as well. Here we go. I have a bit of an incline here, and that's why you're hearing the engine kind of having to get revved up a bit to get going. The blue arrows that you see, that's for taxiing instructions. I guess I could have turned that off, but it is quite a handy little tool for those that don't know, their way around the taxiing and stuff like that. So I could just simply follow the blue lines, and it'll take me to the taxi. Now, at this point, I want to kind of go over the takeoff procedure. What are we going to do to take off? For me, when I take off with the 172, here's my goal. My goal is I want to be about 65 knots, and I understand and appreciate that if you go up here and you go to your assistant says your takeoff speed 39 to 44 knots. I get that. But for me, the reality is stability is the most important thing, and a little more speed gives you a little bit more stability. So 1 notch of flaps, they're going down. So we're going to get on the runway, and we're going to line ourselves up, and we're going to get the throttle going. We're going to keep ourselves center line till we hit somewhere around 60, 65 knots in that area. And I'm going to gently pull back on the yoke. I use a flight yoke. I don't use a joystick, but it's the same thing. Gently pull back until you feel the nose or see the nose start to lift. Once you start to see that nose start to lift, hold that position. So many people make the mistake by pulling back hard on the yoke, and getting this. If you look at the, I'll try to get us a bit of a look at it there. So you can see the tail, this here. So lots of people are doing this. And the minute the aircraft wants to fly, it goes straight up and becomes very unmanageable. So you're going to see the aircraft, you're going to see the nose kind of twitching, and it's going to want to try to lift. So all I do is about that. That's about it. Maybe a little bit more, but that's about it. And I hold that attitude until I get stable. And I'll go over that as we were taking off. So let's get up on the runway. Now again, it's super important for me to have stability. I don't want to be porpoising up and down and losing control and that kind of stuff. I want to have stability. That's the most important thing. So we're going to get ourselves lined up. Now, here's the for new pilots. Here's the thing: you want to have yourself lined up, and you want to take a second and to kind of go over in your mind, what's the plan? So the plan is, I'm going to taxi down the runway, some is around 60, 65 knots. I'm going to begin to pull back on the yoke ever so slightly. I'm going to see the aircraft, the nose start to lift. I'm going to recognize, the nose pivoting over to the left or to the right, and I'm going to compensate with aileron or right and left on the yoke control. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to make sure that I'm stable. Once I have stable lift and what our stable flight, and that's, my attitude of the aircraft isn't porpoising up and down, and it's kind of heading in a trajectory going upwards. Some is around 500 feet per minute or so in that area. When I have stability in flight, I'm going to pull back a little further back on the yoke, and I'm going to put the flap back up. When you push the flap back up, the nose wants to dip, and that's why I pull back a little bit more on the yoke, just to compensate for that drop of the nose. And you'll see what I mean as I do it. So let's consider ourselves lined up, although we're not, but I'll get ourselves lined up as we go. Master throttle forward, full throttle. And I'm waiting for my indicator to start showing airspeed right here. There it goes. It's alive. Speed is alive. Oop. Let's catch that. There we go, 60. So I'm just pulling back ever so slightly, and you see the aircraft start to lift. I want to get myself a little bit more aligned with the runway. And, excuse me, I'm watching the airspeed, that it's not falling. I'm watching the ascend rate or the climb rate, that it's not getting out of control. So I've got pretty decent stable flight. I'm going to pull back just a bit more on the yoke, push the flap up, and you'll see the nose kind of want to dip down. I've compensated for that. And here we are. We're continuing to climb. Somewhere's around 700 actually right now. I can back that down a little bit and get a little more airspeed. There we go. And so now I'm pretty much set. I can trim now, so I can begin to let go of the yoke. There we go. So we have stable flight. We're climbing. Man, I wish I'd have turned that off. Wait, I'm going to shut that off. That's annoying. Nope. Assistant. ATC, you're off. Apply. Apologize for that. That should be off. Anyways, so now I'm going to do the autopilot, and you're going to see myself kind of go over. Autopilot wants to be on the magenta line, right? You're not seeing it on my end, but I'm pressing the autopilot button. I'm pressing the nav button. I'm pressing the vertical speed button to get myself to climb to the altitude that I want. I'm going to probably go to 3,000. I think that's my game plan. I'm at 2,300 already. And we're now turning off to get ourselves in line with our flight plan. You'll see, you should see it appear here, but I'll bring up the virtual map, or the VFR map, not the virtual map. So there it is. There's our flight plan going into the PAW. So we've got, it looks like 13 miles in total. At some point we need to make the decision, 3 miles out, 1,500 feet above the runway. That's kind of my thing, the way I actually do that with the 172. And different aircraft have a different, I have a different setup for that. But those that are first learning to fly, the 172 is the aircraft that you should be trying to fly. And I get it. We all want to get into the big jets and fly around and go look at that and go look at this and so forth and so on. But pick yourself a regional airport, something that you're familiar with, the area that you're familiar with. This is an area that I'm familiar with, and this is the reason why I'm flying it. Not only that, but the two airports that are relatively close in proximity, so I can take off from one, land at the other one, turn around, take off from that one, land at this one that I just took off, and I can just continue to cycle that back and forth until I get comfortable with the takeoff and landing. Those are the two most difficult things to do. So we're going to continue to fly along here. We're going to go to Togo-G, and the aircraft is going to be following this magenta line. As it gets to this waypoint, it's going to turn and it's going to go down here, and it's going to start lining itself up with runway 13. That's our approaching runway. And yeah, that's the takeoff. So I just going to want to review that takeoff just a little bit. What I did, why I did it. Now it's repetitive, but I'm going to do it again. You want to have a game plan. That's the very most important thing. You want to have a game plan. What am I doing? What are the steps that I'm going to do to take off? For me, those steps are this. Get yourself lined up with the runway. Get yourself understanding what your next step is, your next step is, your next step. And that is line up with the runway. Summer's around 60, 65 knots. The nose will get light. Pull back gently on the yoke to get lift. At 65 knots, the aircraft wants to fly. It doesn't need much of an excuse to fly already. So gently pull back on the yoke until you start getting lift. As soon as you get lift, hold that position of the yoke or joystick. When you take off and you begin flying out, try to maintain 500, 600, 700 feet per minute in that area. That indicator is right here. And for those that don't know, you can press the left Alt key. See the magnifying glass? Click on it, and you can make this window bigger, push it off to another monitor, so you can see these indicators better. You can have multiple windows within that as well. So, 65 knots, gently pull back, begin to lift, hold that position, get some altitude. When you get some altitude and you're stable, watch the aircraft that it's not twisting off to the left or off to the right, and if it is, compensate. Move your yoke left or right to kind of compensate that direction, right and left. We're climbing out, and now just pull back ever so slightly more on the yoke and push your flaps up. Ideally, you'd like to be somewhere in that 70 to 75 speed range. That's kind of where I'd like to be when I do it. I could do it a little sooner than that, but the faster you're going, the more stability you have. So for newcomers, take it up. Get yourself going 80, 85 knots if you feel like that's what you need to do. It's no big deal. Pull the flaps up, compensate for the nose dip down, readjust yourself to get that attitude of 500, 600, 700 feet per minute climb out. Watch your speed, that you're continuing to maintain your existing speed and ideally gaining speed. And that's why I climb out at 500 feet per minute, not 700, because I'll gain speed. Now you want to trim. Typically you're going to trim upward as you're slowly releasing the yoke back to its middle position. And that's the takeoff. That's it. That's all you need to do for the takeoff. Review what I said a couple of times so that it's right in your head. It's right in your head, and you've got it. You've got that checklist in your head. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this, and that's how I'm going to do it. So I'm going to fly a little bit here. I'm going to get myself to a closer position. Right now, I am right now. I am 4 point. If you look at this screen up here, the distance. That's the transition that we're heading for. So I am four nautical miles from that transition. The information on that screen is pretty much all you'll ever need. That screen shows you your VFR map right there. You know, it shows that you're on the GPS heading of 76. You're heading for this point. You can see the next point is right there. It's going to come this way, make its turn. It's going to follow this line, but as it makes its turn here and it gets just past this point here, this line is going to go magenta and this one will go back to white. And you will see up here, we'll see that next leg, which is Victor India X-ray India Romeo. For new pilots, we use this crazy language to describe these things, and I'm kind of getting more and more used to that. But for those that aren't familiar with it, it's VIXIR. That's where we're headed to. That's our last transition before we actually get to the airport, which is the PA Airport, CYQD, or Charlie Yankee, Quebec Delta. So we should be turning here shortly. I'm going to get that out of your way. You can see here we're just about to that leg. My guess, and if you don't know, if you don't know distances and stuff like that, you can always go back here, go here, and we can see, it's hard to see it, so I'll bring that screen back over. We can see now we are 6 miles to the next waypoint, and then beyond that another 5 miles to the airport. So when I get here, when I get to this waypoint, that's where I probably want to be, 1,500 feet or so, or at least starting to set up for 1,500 feet above the runway. Because as I said, I'm going to be 1,500 feet above the runway, about 3 miles out. So we're going to pull that back. I'm going to move this out of the way as well. In fact, I'm going to close that because I don't want that out anymore. And I'm going to get my set up. Now, I quite often get myself prepared well in advance for all of this. I do that purposely because if you wait until the final minute and you get distracted for just a brief moment, you find yourself all of a sudden being behind the 8 ball, and that's not something I want to be, is behind it. So we are ticking along when we are now 5 miles to our next waypoint. And that's the waypoint that we're going to try to begin getting ourselves set up to 1,500 feet. We're flying at 3,000 feet. So I'm gonna bring it down to that 2,400 feet. Remember, I said the PA Airport is 875 feet above sea level. So 800, or basically 900 plus 1,500 is 2,400. So I'm going to bring us down to 2,400 feet above the sea level, which gets us, as I said, 1,500 feet. And I'm going to wait till 3 miles out, and I'm going to begin my descent in. So at that point, I'm going to have autopilot turned off, and I'm going to manually fly it in. Don't worry about trying to capture the center line and stuff like that. I've been doing simulation flying for quite some time, and I still struggle trying to get that center line. If you could put it on the runway, that's a win. So don't worry about the finite details of it and beat yourself up about, oh, geez, I messed that up or I messed that up. Don't worry about that. That's not important. So I can scroll in and I can see there's the runway. And I know I'm just off to the right of the runway, and that's okay. I'm not far off. 2 miles out to our waypoint. VICXI, that's the waypoint that we're going for, or going to. I should move that window up here so you guys can see that. That's the waypoint we're going to. Here's our speed, 106. So I want to be somewhere around 70, 80 knots, somewhere in around that speed. It's it's a very dependent speed based on conditions, temperature, not temperature, but weather, wind, all that stuff. But somewhere in around there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back my speed up. So I'm going to back my speed up somewhere around 90. And around there. The white line you're seeing coming up here now, this is called flap range. Technically, you're not supposed to be in flaps or on flaps until you're in that area. That's the technical way of it. Again, don't worry about the technical side of it as much. So I got good speed. I'm going to begin my descent. And you'll see the nose kind of dip down a bit. As the nose dips down, you gain speed, so pull the throttle back a little bit so that you're not out of control. And because of the alignment here, I'm probably going to kick off before I get there so I can align to the runway better. And in fact, I think I'm going to turn Autopilot off now so I could see that I'm misaligned to the runway, which is fine because this alignment wasn't an ILS alignment. So off goes the Autopilot. I'm going to pull. All I'm trying to do right now is get myself aligned more or less to the runway. I don't have to be perfect, but I want it to be more or less aligned. My frame rate is taking a bit of a beating here for some reason or other, and I don't understand why, but it is. Okay, so here we are. We're 2 miles out from the paw, 1 state notch of flaps, and so you'll be able to see that I'm in fairly decent shape. I'm not wildly out of control in speed. I'm sort of lined up with the runway. My descent is not horrible. You know, I'm not having to push down and go 500 miles an hour to get to a proper altitude. I'm going slow enough that I can control the speed and get it much slower as I need it, which I'm trying to attempt right now. So I got my throttle is right off now. That's my second or final stage of flaps. That should get some whoa on it for me. Oh, my frame rates are terrible. We're coming in a little fast, but that's okay. As soon as I flare here a little bit, I'm going to scrub off some speed. There it is. Nose wheel down. Brakes. And here we are. We have arrived. Flaps up. I'll just get off the runway. And then I'll explain and kind of go over it a little bit again, what took place. Okay. So we kind of can go over this now. as you saw the aircraft coming down, you saw me kind of weaving back and forth a little bit, and that's just me trying to get aligned with the runway. Um, I may have to do this video again because the frame rates were just terrible coming in. I think the sim was getting ready to crash, quite honestly. Um, but I was trying to get aligned with the runway. My speed was, around that 80 knots, 85 knots as I got to that point of 3 to 5 miles out. I had decent altitude. I was in that range where I like to be. Um, the last thing you want to do is certainly you don't want to come in too low, because too low you can't really recover from too low. If you get a bit of a stall, bang, you hit the ground, it's too late, it's over. So come in high if you're going to do anything. You can always go around and make the attempt again. Um, you want to be somewhere around that 1,500 feet. Excuse me, somewhere around that 1,500 feet off the runway, um, on your approach. Some 2.5, 3 miles out, and those numbers are not exact numbers. So please, when I say what I'm saying, don't take it so literal that you have to be at 1,500 feet 3 miles out. You don't have to be hit 1,500 feet. If you're at 1,600 feet, if you're at 1,400 feet, if you're at 1,800 feet, those numbers are all more than well. They're more than good. It's a threshold that I aim for, so that I am not 4,000 feet above the runway, so that I am not traveling at 110 or 120 miles an hour, a mile away from the runway. So I just use those as benchmarks, right? So, 85, 90 knots, 80 knots in that area, 1,500 feet, 1,800 feet, yeah, even 2,000 feet. It's all good. Um, you want to be lined up to the runway. And for me, I want to be lined up to the runway 3 miles out. I actually want to be lined up to the runway long before 3 miles out. I very much try to be lined up to the runway, even 10 miles out. The further you are with lineup, the better. You don't have to worry about that alignment. You don't have to worry that you're 40 degrees off the runway and stuff like that. So you notice that I pulled the autopilot off when I did, because I was coming to the right side of the runway, and I don't want to be a half a mile to the threshold and now have to make these very sharp turns to hit the runway. So that's kind of it. I may remake another video and do it again. I may remake another video and do it again, because my frame rates are just horrible. And I'd like it to have it a lot smoother. I found myself having to juggle around trying to get myself alignment and it not reacting the way it should. So find yourself an airport, go through the first stage of it, take off, and get the right attitude to take off. Find yourself a place to land, and get yourself lined up and follow those steps. You'll find that if you do those things as it did for me, they'll probably work. Don't worry about real world weather. Don't worry about real time. Make it calm. Don't give yourself all these restrictions or all of these added hardships that you have to deal with, like crosswinds and gusts and stuff like that. Don't give yourself any of those. Don't give yourself bad visibility. Pick a clear day. You can change that. That's done up here. And you can go live time, but like I said, don't set yourself a daylight time. I'm in live weather, but you don't need to be. You can set yourself clear sky. So when you set yourself those parameters, you have just that. You have clear skies. It's calm. You can see the windsock over there, not going into something crazy. So give yourself the best attempt at success, so that you don't have to worry about all those other external things. Right, that's me rambling on enough. It's Raymond from Stream Gamers in association with Fly-by-Wires. Come check us out. We are not the Fly-by-Wires that made the A320. We are Fly-by-Wires, not Fly-by-Wire. It's flybywire.net is our website. Our Discord is Fly-by-Wire. come check us out. All right, bye.